welcome to everyone. I love the poll because the interesting part about it is that I am also a Tableau user with a single use case. So I'm right there with the majority. And I'm here to share my experience with learning in this whole process and try to share a cool story as we go. So I will quickly get the presentation going here. So guys, just a little bit about me. My life in one photo. This is a perfect photo that illustrates me working on the couch, trying to parent my now 9-month old daughter, a jealous dog that doesn't know where he stands in the family now. And when I get some time, I actually try to take the chores and take care of the chores. Besides that, I am 14 times certified. Fun fact that Einstein Analytics is not one of those certifications, and hopefully soon it will be. So we'll add a number 15. I've started my life my journey in the Salesforce ecosystem as an admin in 2010. Got my very first cert in 2012, and I've been consulting since 2013. And recently, a colleague of mine and myself, we both started an organization called Force Anywhere, where we are hoping to make Salesforce freelancing easy for everyone. We're super excited about that. So that's just a little bit about me. But beyond that, let's talk a little bit about this project. And for those that are not aware and you're wondering, what is Formula One? Formula One can be easily summarized by asking yourself, what is the most expensive way to go around in circles and end up in the exact same spot? And if you ever ask yourself the question, the answer is Formula One. So Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsports and racing. It is the top watched, you have some of the biggest athletes or drivers in the world are all competing for these 20 seats in an F1 calendar. Just some basic statistics. This year alone, we have 23 races in 22 countries. You have 20 drivers for 10 constructor teams. An average pit stop time for changing all 4 tires is 2.4 seconds. The fastest one is 1.8 seconds. So by the time that I'm done talking, people already changed tires for 10 cars just on this slide alone. Interesting stats for data is that we have 460 race entries per season, and each car actually generates 220 gigs of data each race. So it's like super exciting. And if you like data, Formula One is a great place to look at for it. And just to give you a brief idea of how much money is in it, here's a screenshot from just one team. And a budget for 1 year of racing is 400 million. And as I was showing, data is everything nowadays. Trying to get that extra edge, more and more teams are relying on data and statistics and simulations, and also machine learning and artificial intelligence. And I got a chance to talk to a lot of F1 engineers in my project, which was pretty exciting. Now, I want to talk 2 seconds about Fantasy Formula One. There's a game called Fantasy Formula One, and this project kind of started with that in mind. So the idea is you put 5 drivers and one constructor together. For each race, you can do over 600,000 combinations between different drivers and constructors. Throughout the entire season, you have over 14 million possible outcomes. And part of the project was to try to guess which team or which combination of teams would AI predict that would score the most points. And the way that it's ended up happening in the predictions is that we run 4 predictions. We try to predict the qualifying position, the race finish position, will they finish the race, and will they get the fastest lap? And if we get those 4 predictions right, we can calculate how many points each team is going to score, and then we join it all together in a very fancy data flow, and then we put that out there, and we'll show some images of that. And we'll be making some more predictions as we go, and I'll talk more about that. But here's just a quick screenshot. So how we join all of the different drivers and a constructor, putting that team value together and being able to sort by the predicted points. So this is just an example of kind of like what we've been putting together in the project. So just a brief talk about timeline. This project has been about 8 months in the making, started back in July of last year. And we started very simple, trying to predict some fantasy outcomes. I started learning myself. I had no experience with Tableau CRM, or back then Einstein Analytics, so long ago, 8 months ago. And it was just basically just trying to throw everything into a story and see what would come out. I played around also with the Einstein prediction builders. I started with data flows. I switched to recipes. And then afterwards came the data prep, running some basic initial stories. By November timeframe, I put that everything is debt because I was playing around with it so much that I inherited so much technical debt on my own as I was changing things around and trying to add more fields or calculate averages. By that time, we were trying to do so much. But the interesting thing about it is that we had conversations with team members and people from Data Tribe that helped me a ton. Lucas Ribeiro is the one that's gave me a huge hand. There's others that I definitely have to acknowledge as we go. But and interestingly enough, I started posting a little bit about it, and actual Formula One engineers that are working in Formula One today got involved, and it was really interesting to be able to pick their brain. And I'll talk a little bit about that. By December, we started really having fun. So coincidentally, Formula One also partnered with AWS to try to make their own qualifying predictions. So it kind of became a little David versus Goliath kind of situation, and trying to make predictions and see who would get the most of them correct. December was a lot of validating data models. There was a lot of trial and error and a lot of my experience. And I started up a YouTube channel to try to kind of share a lot of my findings. And now in February, we're in the big leagues. I'm, famous DataDreamin speaker here today. But all said and done, I'm trying to forecast the 2021 season and really just try to fine tune what we have. For anyone that's curious, what the project entails so far really was, for the vast majority of it, is just data modeling and data capture. There's just so much data and so many sources of data. And as you're trying to clean that up, I mentioned that technical debt, and that's really been the most time-consuming piece for me in my journey. Learning the Einstein Discovery platform was a key component as well. But the final piece was actually validating machine learning concepts, because a lot of times you can put things together and you get your predictions on your stories. You can see your R squared, you can see your confidence level, but you ask yourself, like, is this correct? Is this right? So I actually worked with a couple of people that helped me from a statistics and machine learning background to help me validate what I had, and which was really interesting. A quick slide on everyone that I need to thank. There are a lot of people in the data tribe. Lucas Ribeiro was a big one. Pete Lyons has spent hours with me. He has his YouTube channel, Salesforce for Everyone. Sorry, Let's Play Salesforce. I'm mixing up my things. Apologize, Pete, if you're listening. But the Salesforce product team has also been really big. Bobby Brill has dedicated time to this. I was able to connect with so many people, also on the Amazon AWS side, the Formula One engineers, and even statistics professors all the way from Australia that helped me on this journey to put all of this together. So really a big thank you. This has been a massive collective effort that I think people just got interested and involved by the passion, not only of data, but also of Formula One. So it really has been a fantastic project that I didn't intend for it to be as big as it's becoming. So it's super exciting, and I can't thank people enough for doing so. And the final question, if you're asking yourself, is, but why, Erick? But why do this, right? And the answer is very simple. The original excuse is that I had no experience in Tableau CRM. As a consultant, I truly believe that artificial intelligence is going to be a key factor in the coming years. And I just wanted a use case before I started trying to gain projects in the artificial intelligence realm. The second piece is that I love data, and Formula One just has so much of that data publicly accessible and neatly organized in CSV files. And then finally, it's just for the love of Formula One. And it's very exciting to try to get it right and make your predictions and go to the race weekend and see what you can do. So with that said, because I do want to be able to share a lot of what I've learned and be able to apply it to business, I want to take the remaining time and share a couple of quick lessons that I've learned in my journey in learning. And the first one is building data models with regards to parent records. This screenshot didn't come out the best, but the idea was, when I first started, I was trying to connect the race entry records directly to the drivers and the teams. And if you're looking at a race entry, I would have the parent objects, and I would just look up directly to it. So if you have a race entry for Lewis Hamilton, I would say, okay, in my story, I want the driver name, so Lewis Hamilton, as opposed to instead doing what I learned later, to use the the qualifications of them. So, what is their average gap to the leader? How many races have they participated in total? And taking that criteria, similarly, if you're talking about an opportunity or an account, you would not want to tie it to the particular account. So you don't want to say, okay, in my story, I want the account name. You would probably benefit a lot more if you want the lead source and the industry or the number of employees, any qualification criteria. So that way, when someone else comes along, you're able to get much better predictions because you're running your stories based on the criteria and not on the account name itself, which will help tremendously. I put zip code as well. I use this a lot in the US with a lot of customers where we tie a lot of demographic information. So if you're running an org that's very geographically based, we tie a zip code record to it. Certainly answer some questions to that if we have some time. Some quick screenshots. So you can see here how this starts looking a lot better, where I'm using actual categories. So engine manufacturer, is the driver in their rookie year? Have they what's the rate of beating their teammate in the last 90 days? How many races have they had with instructors? So all of those have been really instrumental in building the data models as we're trying to put our stories together. The second story I want to talk about is actually dealing with other buckets. So if you can see here, if we're looking through all of the races in the Formula One database, the vast majority of them were in dry weather. And the challenge that we've had with this one was that if anyone's played around with stories, you can see here all the way at the end, if there's not enough data on something, Einstein Analytics, and I think this is just machine learning in general, will bucket things as other. And you're kind of lost because whatever average value other falls in, they'll put that record that you're trying to analyze in there. So if you're thinking about Salesforce and like lead sources, you just added a new lead source and you have your first opportunity based on that lead source, there's not going to be that much information. So if other values that are not commonly used are also there and have some terrible reputation or have some amazing win rate reputation, you may, because that new lead source value that you just added in is so new, it'll just get bucketed into other and avoid or just kind of like be influenced because there's just not enough records for it to make a proper prediction on, and it'll just go into that bucket. I talked about that with Formula One engineers, and one of the interesting things that even they admitted to kind of fudging the numbers. This was the exact the terms that they used, where what they would do is that they would try to replicate data, and I'm curious to hear what the product owners would have to say, but they would replicate data. They would just literally clone records in the past to kind of help influence the model to say, hey, there's enough records about this lead source, right, to be able to make a decision. In my case, it was the weather, but just something that I learned as we kind of talked about. So there also is a lot of talk about, I have an actual use case with Einstein lead scoring. If anyone's used Einstein lead scoring, you'll see that you really don't have a lot of configuration in Einstein lead scoring, which is outside of Einstein discovery altogether. So one of the things that we had to do was that we had to load a lot of past converted leads records to help influence and kind of teach the model in some ways what would be important for you to consider. So, just a couple of things to keep in mind. Einstein lead scoring is completely outside of Tableau CRM. It's more of a Sales Cloud thing, but just one of the examples. The third out of 5 lessons that I'm covering today is seasonality versus calculating averages. So this is a trick that if you love flows as much as I do, you will probably run into situations where you're going to try to average things. And one of my use cases was trying to use the average qualifying position over the last 12 months and try to roll that up from all the race entries for that driver and roll that up to the driver and use this value in my story. The problem that I ran into there is that so much can change between a driver's performance and their qualifying performance in 2 to 3 races, that if you're looking past the whole 12 months and you're trying to bunch that up in one field, you eliminate the seasonality altogether from your model, and losing all of that precious information or conflicting the precious information so you don't get to see it. So I used event date, and I had a great ability to see how with event date and keeping their qualifying position in the story, mixing event date with qualifying position, I got a much better result because date fields, you can do the seasonality by year, by month, however you want to do it. And it can kind of predict saying, hey, in 2021, this person is doing really well versus 2019 where they didn't do so well. And that was extremely helpful. So if you're going to do things like roll-ups of averages into flows or sums into flows, just be careful with the time period going too long or too short, because you lose your seasonality. And that was just one of the big lessons that I had there. Lesson number 4, stories on pick lists versus numbers, right? So one of the interesting things was I had fields for qualifying position and race position on pick lists at first. So first, second, third, and I had that. And one of the things that I quickly realized is that Einstein discovery, or just machine learning in general, sees text as text. It's not orderly in fashion. Whereas if you select a number field, then you can choose to maximize or minimize the results, because the machine learning sees that as a scale. So I had a lot more success running stories once I switched them over to trying to minimize, right, qualifying position or minimize race position to be able to make those predictions. And that was a really interesting one for me. The final piece that I want to leave everyone with is be able to force the outlier. Is basically test your model as much as you can. The big story for me was that last year, a driver had to switch teams because the primary driver contracted COVID, and someone in a lower team all the way at the back qualified to, or got moved to a team that's all the way at first. And when I made the switch in the data model, because his average qualifying position was all the way at the back, the prediction was somewhere in the middle of the field for him on this new car, which I knew that wasn't true. So it made me realize to switch some of the information that I had, you know, from the driver level to the team level, because the car was that powerful and the car had that much more influence than what the model was giving on the score. So it's a trial and error type of learning. I highly like to share that, you know, test your models, do as much as you can. And if anyone's interested in this, I'll try to keep some time open for it. I try to do the best what I do in my time. If anyone wants to see this in action, because I don't have time to demo today, it's youtube.com/motorsportAI, where I'm putting all this stuff. You're welcome to go in and check it out. But with that said, a big thank you. Hopefully I did okay on time. You know, if anyone wants to send me an email, here's my information. The website's there. And I will, I believe, pass it back to Zach and Jody.
Did you want to give your Twitter a shout out as well if people have additional questions?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's SFDC Responsibly. @SFDC Responsibly is my Twitter handle. And I try to use the hashtag Salesforce Responsibly.
Awesome. So we only have one question right now in the Q&A. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to enter them in. And we do have a little extra time. You actually 2 minutes under. But one of the questions is, where did you get your F1 data from?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There is a website which is called ergas.com/MRD, which has this data set. But the better answer here for anyone that's interested in a use case is Kaggle. So Kaggle has a lot of awesome data sets. And this Ergas data set that I'm referencing, someone put it on Kaggle, so it's equally available there. But Kaggle in general, if you have a different use case, if you want to do different sports or whatever the case may be, if you want to spin up a dev org and be able to find some good data, Kaggle is a really, really good place to find some really fresh data sets that will allow you to you know, run your use case, get more familiar with the tool.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions, so I am going to hand it over to Manny.